Hey everyone, welcome to our first virtual What Moves Her event. I am so thrilled to have you here with us today. Thanks for taking some time out of your day. I hope you grabbed a cup of coffee or iced tea or whatever your beverage of choice is this afternoon. I'm really excited to bring this to you. For those of you that aren't familiar with the What Moves Her series, this is a series that we started at Coldwell Banker Realty towards the end of last year with our first big live event held in January. And it's focused really on women in our industry, helping them develop their leadership skills, professional development, really help women through a strong network of women, both within the real estate industry and outside of it, achieve their dreams, to really encourage people to dream big and to accomplish all they possibly can and want. Sometimes through the lens of the real estate industry, sometimes through the lens of women that have dominated in other fields that may be outside of our industry and what we can learn from them as well. So this is our first virtual event. We're calling this the Portraits of What Moves Her. And we're going to be tackling topics here that are really relevant to today's climate. What we're seeing today, obviously, all of our worlds have been dramatically impacted in one way or another over the past, I can't believe it, 10 weeks or so, maybe longer, in this environment as our country, really our world is being impacted by an unprecedented event with COVID-19. And so we really hope that this can continue to be sort of a network and a group of individuals that can come together once a month and share how we're managing, how we're coping, how we're really thriving and protecting ourselves and our business as we move forward through this time together. So again, we are going to be running this series once a month on the third Wednesday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern. The events will be recorded and replayed. And we also encourage you to ask questions in the chat, and we will answer them the best we can throughout the series. So this month, we are focusing on resilient leadership. So never more than now is leading people and leading teams and really leading our families more important. And resiliency really is a key trait in overcoming obstacles and just really picking up and moving forward. And my first guest with us on this series that I'm thrilled to have with us is the Chief Operating Officer of Coldwell Banker, Liz Gehringer. Thank you so much for being here, Liz.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I admire you so much, and I'm really excited that you invited me to come and join you today and chat.
Well, we can totally fangirl over each other because it's the feeling is mutual. And maybe you'll tell me to stop spinning because I'm sure somewhere someone's annoyed that I'm spinning so much in my chair. But I'm thrilled to have you here. You've had just an absolutely amazing career, and we're going to dig into that a little bit throughout this. And really focused on some key areas that I think are so important right now as we lead through a crisis: ethics, compliance, those types of things that really are paramount. And you were the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer of Realogy before having this role. So certainly something that comes into play in a time of crisis, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think crisis has been a really great time to sort of pull together all of these pieces of our careers, all of our experiences. And you and I get to work pretty closely together, but I think we were still excited to even have this hour to really get to connect and focus on each other and share ideas a little bit. But totally agree. I mean, culture is so critical right now. And, as is ethical behavior. So these are things I've spent a lot of my career on, and I'm excited to have this real life application going on. It's weird to be excited about a crisis, but I mean, in terms of leadership, this has been a pretty interesting experience full of, growth and learning.
It really is, Liz. And, it's funny that you sort of hit on that. Like, it's weird to be excited because you don't, obviously this is undoubtedly an extremely trying time for people. And it's impacting people in different geographies and in different markets differently, both from a business perspective and a personal perspective. And so, I've even found when you talk across the country, it's different, right? Different areas of the Northeast versus, sort of the South or the West. So it's really interesting. But one thing is for sure, leadership is often born out of crisis, and it's often tested during crisis, times of crisis. And on our first event, I spoke about in Chicago a lot about emotional intelligence and the importance of leading with emotional intelligence and how crucial of a skill that is to have empathy and lead, and that's crucial during this time as well. I think resiliency is one of those other key traits. It's woven into that a little bit, but the ability to be agile, right? To be focused forward, to move often with speed without all of the answers. There's no playbook for this, right? None of us went to school and took the class on how to sort of reimagine your business overnight and protect your people and everything else. And so the ability to kind of take a minute, get sort of a gut punch that maybe we weren't expecting, and then say, okay, let me keep going. This isn't going to stop me, I think is a crucial component, and why I think resiliency, both in our professional lives and our personal lives, are so important and something we lean on. I keep looking at it, and I talk to my teams a lot about bucketing it. So if any of them are on, they're probably super tired of hearing me say this, but 3 real key sort of pillars. The idea of putting people first and foremost, leading with safety, with health, asking team members, are you okay? How are you doing? Assuming good intent, right? As I said, there's no playbook for this. So we have to have some trust in our leadership and in the people we're working with, that they are doing the best they can with the information they have, that I know is changing daily, sometimes hourly, right? And then protecting our business. And so, I'm curious, when you look at it, how are you approaching this as you're leading your teams and all of, the hundreds of affiliates and agents that you're leading on a daily basis?
Well, that's really rich. I love the buckets that you use there. I love that, beginning with safety first. And we've heard that throughout our company as well. I think that you can't go wrong if you begin from that place. It's interesting. That's who we are anyway. It's such a people-focused business. So on the one hand, that comes sort of naturally to us. On the other hand, I think we used to say, it's okay, make decisions, have confidence. This is a relationship business. Like, what the right thing to do is for people, but we never thought we'd be talking about safety for people. I mean, right. It's like everything is just in this new and exaggerated, there's like new aspects for us to think about at every turn, in every bit of our advice. I think we have to pick up on what you said about agility and resiliency. We were so focused on being agile people, right? So we were focused on business. How is business changing? How is pricing changing? What do agents need? What is the best agent service we can provide? What do our franchise and affiliates need from us? What is going on, and how can we be constantly ready to change and serve and figure out, where the business is headed? This is like next level. I feel like resiliency is like piling, everything imaginable on top of that. It's that same thing, but the morning can look so different from yesterday. As you said, one region can be so different from another region. I mean, the way this came at us and challenged us to, bring our best selves, trust, the people first piece, what you said, trust your instincts. Like, you have to be able to make a decision and not torture yourself. You're not going to have as much information as we would love to have, so I feel like resiliency is a little bit of like agility at the next level. It's the most challenged form of it. It's like, can you really be agile? Can you keep yourself up? Can you keep your team up? And can you keep your business up? As you said, it's like, it's the same thing we've done, but under so much more pressure. And, I've watched you beautifully do it. I think that I've watched our franchise affiliates beautifully do it. I've watched our agents tell their stories through our, we have our own Facebook site, but you see it out in the business too. I mean, there's, it's like not all on us. And I think that's wonderful. We look around for examples. So, it's a little bit of our own, but it's a lot of like what we're seeing around us.
Yeah. And it is, it's amazing what we're seeing, and, seeing some agents. I texted one about a week or two after this happened. I said, oh my God, I love the agility. And she's like, oh my God, I'm an acrobat, right? Like, just even trying to figure out how to reach. So shout out to Dawn McKenna, if she's out there. It's because the consumers are reacting in a different way. Everybody's life. I mean, that's one of the most amazing things. And it's both overwhelming and comforting at the same time, that like everyone's in this in some capacity. I mean, there's not one life, I think, that's been untouched. And so I think we see a little bit more empathy and compassion coming through as well in some of this, and an understanding. You touched on how every day can look different. It can certainly look different from a work perspective. It looks dramatically different from a personal perspective for many of us as well.
True.
Can you think about, and we can definitely talk about how we're managing that at home, and how sometimes we're not managing it, and that's totally okay too. And I keep telling my team, like, take a minute, it's okay. I sat in this chair yesterday. I told you from 7 a.m. till 7:34, I sent you my last email. And for the first time, I just looked at my family. I was like, I'm done. And I just tapped out. I went to bed. I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning, minor wake up to put my daughter to bed in between. But I don't want to feel guilty about that, right? I think there's a reality that occurs. There's an exhaustion that occurs. But I woke up today like, all right, let's do this, right? Like, okay, I needed that. Are you finding that you have to do that sometimes, that you have to, and what is that you're doing to keep yourself going? Because you and I talked about the crazy hours and the 12, we always work long hours, but this is this leadership and just being in it. It takes a lot out of you, right? So how have you managed that a little bit before we go back into some more of the real business stuff?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really come into my life in the last couple of weeks, and it should have come into my life sooner, but over the last couple of weeks, I've realized that you can use your earbuds or headphones and take a walk and take a call at the same time. I don't know why it took me quite that long to figure that out, but just finding a couple of calls during the day, picking a couple of spots that I can be getting fresh air at the same time. And I miss travel in that's when I do my best thinking. So when I get on a plane or I'm, just in a new design space, I'm really into, design and space and get very influenced by what's around me. I love an art museum. That's just when my own thinking is the best, when I'm a little removed. And so even just a walk around the neighborhood, the trees, whatever outside, I think you have to figure out what you respond to. And I just know that I respond to a change of scenery. People make so much fun of me, my family especially. I flip every room constantly. I'm constantly repainting walls, moving art. And that helps. So for me, just changing things up. But the walking has been really helpful. And I know some people are doing it purposely with each other. So if you and I wanted to catch up, we would say, let's just do, a walk and talk instead of a meeting. I think that is a really nice idea. So it's simple, but that's helping.
I think that's a great idea. And well, yeah, I mean, I told you yesterday, I moved the desk in my office. My whole family came in and said, what happened? I was like, I don't know. I was on a call and I just, so yesterday was my day, right? Like maybe it's because the treadmill broke. Maybe I should just go outside more. But I do think it's important to call that out, right? That sort of mental space and know what made us tick before, right? And I realized for me, I had zero time away from anyone, from anything. And I've spent the better part of 10 years on a plane or not home. And while I'm loving being home with my daughter and my family, there is a real part of me that is aching to get back to some of that routine, because I had learned how to be successful within that. And you kind of have that moment of like, well, I really have to be agile and resilient and pivot my business and find out how to make it successful, continued here. And in order to do that, it's finding time to put me first sometimes. And it's hard to do when we're living in our office.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful to be able to be home and to be able to be fully accessible. But then you and I talked about being something like absent present or whatever we were calling it. Like it's weird to be here, but then sometimes you realize, wow, someone just walked by and I did like, oh, whoa, okay. You can be so into the teams and so into this video moment that you can be home, but not even actually be home. So, trying to, recognize that. I mean, we're used to being able to be home and being completely home with our family if we are. But now it's like this work, life blend. Then you can also become more absent. But I think it's just starting to realize that everyone seems to be processing the same things together.
Yeah, I've definitely seen and I'm curious what you're seeing in the affiliate base and those that have pivoted maybe earlier in the process than now, and agents as well. We can talk about that. It feels a little bit like people took their finger off the pause button in the last 2 or 3 weeks and kind of said, you know what, consumers too. I have to figure out how to maneuver in this world. Like my need for a house didn't go away. My need to go to work didn't go away. So, as you look around at the people you've been talking to, and, what are some of the things that are emerging that your, folks that you're talking to, maybe even on your leadership team, that maybe others could hear and embrace and say, oh yeah, I haven't thought about that yet, or that would help me. And, we've heard a lot about like the virtual Facebook tours for open houses and other things, but as a leader, what are you seeing? Has anything risen up or kind of said, wow, that's a great idea?
I think I've seen real strength in a couple of ways among some of the affiliates, for sure. Like some of the best examples, and they're all great. But making sure that they, at first I think we took a pause. No one wanted to be still looking for business or pushing for, everyone said, no, we need to figure out how to care for our customers and our agents. So people were checking on everyone, and then people were giving people masks just for their own personal use, not just like looking for masks to try to figure out if they could do an open house. I mean, they were like genuinely caring for people. So they were back to their core. And then I think just as you said, and they were focused on how do we continue the business? They started thinking about how do we stay in touch with people? And I think we started sorting through information, right? The very best were sorting. There were so many relief packages and so much guidance. And so the very best were giving information on that, right? Giving information how to interpret it, how people could get relief. And I think that was, really best practice. We did a lot of that. We also offered just a ton of learning. So to keep people engaged, it's a great time to upskill. And we know that our agents are doing that. We've had 100,000 people tuning into to our many events. I mean, it's been how rewarding is that for us to feel like we're still connecting with people and giving them opportunity to focus on how they're still developing, or just keeping people occupied in a way that feels productive and good to them. So I think those were some of the main pieces that we did. I think the struggle comes when sometimes the agents do want to get back out, and customers do want, and we can't do everything that people want to do because sometimes it's not safe yet, or it violates a rule. And so, you have to keep everything happening the way it needs to happen according to safety and rules too. And that takes leadership, and that takes
I
like,
was just going to say, yeah. Yeah, it does take courage. I think that's a great word. I think, another word that falls certainly under the definition of leadership is courage. And often it's the courage, to say no to something, right? Or to, and a lot of it, especially now, is balancing that. You do have very disparate opinions and feelings and impact across, the vast constituencies of work and life and schools, that, everything. And it's like, lead with good intention and do what you think is the next best thing, right? And that is one of the more difficult components of leadership, right? Being able to do that, being able to make decisions that may be controversial, that may not make everyone, it's not going to be the yes everyone wants, right? Or it may be the no some aren't looking for, whatever that may be. But I think now more than ever, it's people are dependent upon that and looking for that guidance. And one of the things I noticed at the very beginning of this was that real call to like, tell me what to do, right? Like, and like, we're like, oh, we're figuring it out, right? We don't really know, but it's a huge value that a leader can bring to the table. And to your point, sometimes it's not the right, but it's the right now, right? It's the best thing right now.
Yeah, and our brand, who we are, who we are through a difficult time, each one of us, and how we represent Coldwell Banker, or any brand. It's that this is a really good time to reflect what you really mean by that. With whomever you are and whatever brand you're with, like what does it mean, and how do you represent it in the craziest of times? We really want to make sure we stand for trust all the time. So we're going to give professional guidance. That's why we went through with care and made sure we informed people and trained people. Like we stuck to our basics. We didn't go out and we're not out trying to do difficult things to competitors. Instead, we're trying to say let's figure out what's good for the real estate industry overall. Let's go to Washington on things that help housing. You stop being a competitor, and you get a little bit more of a what's good for everybody, what's good for people, and what's good for our business. And I'm really proud of the way we do that. I think that we just do such a good job with that. To try to figure out the right thing. And that's where I got to see that, that ethics piece pull back in.
Yeah, I
So
was
it's
going to
great.
ask, to have you dive in a little bit on that because, we did kind of wrap our arms around the industry, and I think our industry is so community born, right? And we really we're all in this together, and that sounds kind of cliche, but we really are. And I think there's an awesome leading by example that's occurring, and not leading by example because we care what others think, but doing it because it's the right thing. And that's who we are at our core. So, you talk about ethics and compliance, and obviously you spent a tremendous amount of your career focused on that. So super important now, obviously. But why? And how are you continuing, or how are we continuing to really create that culture virtually in like a different environment? How are you doing that?
Well, I think there are a couple of things come quickly to mind. One is how you treat people. I mean, culture to me, everyone's always like, "Oh my gosh, culture! What is it anyway?" Culture to me always felt like it's who we are. It's how we treat each other. It's how we conduct our business. It's really who we are, how we behave. And I think one of the ways that you see it really clearly is in how you treat people. And so it's not just us saying, okay, let's keep everybody safe and let's understand our office
Mm-hmm.
opening and closing and agents and things, how to keep them safe and our customers. But it gets to be about, as we looked at how to manage through the business and encourage businesses to appropriately manage costs and think about things in a really responsible way.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to treat our people through that, like through that entire process, and being transparent and figuring out the best thing, to the extent that do need to impact anybody. How are you making sure they still have full benefits and that they're still taken
Mm-hmm.
care of, because this is a health crisis? Like, that is a wonderful example, I think, of ethics. It definitely begins with how you treat the people most immediate to you, the culture
Yes.
that you create. And then you can extend to you can't treat beyond. If you don't treat your people in that way, you're not going to get to the rest of the organization, to your customers and to your agents.
That's right. And
So I think,
I know go on.
no, I was
Go
going to say
ahead.
I think that's one example. How you treat those closest, I think, is probably the most core. And so and the other thing I would say is also competitors, which is a bit of that example of like going for the industry overall in a time like this. There were a lot of questions. You and I talked about it. A lot of questions about, can you recruit right
Mm-hmm.
now? Is it just like, should everyone just stand down on recruiting? And I think it's a question that floated for a bit of time for everyone. For us as a
Mm-hmm.
company, we have our own brokerages, as you know, you run them, for affiliates who face the same questions. And I think it was a little quiet for a time, but then agents make movements based on what they see or who they want to be affiliated with based on behavior. And this is one of those things, like if they see, actually this is a company, or whatever they're seeing, whatever behavior they're seeing by companies, they may
Yep.
say, that makes sense to me. Like this is actually a really good time to kind of look at a company with clarity. I mean, no
Yeah.
one's going to be
Totally
perfect. We're
agree.
all going to make mistakes, but how are we conducting ourselves as to our competitors? We're not like out to create violence in the market. Like, we're all really out to create the best um, home buying and selling experience with like the most options and in the most efficient and helpful way for consumers. We believe in that.
Yeah, we really do. And I think we have a platform now wherein we've been able to show that sort of at large in a different way. And we pushed forward with our diversity initiatives on some of the training and the fair housing, and we opened that up to the entire industry. And that really is at the core of who we are. And I think that's even in the time of this, I think we've never lost sight of what's so important and what's fundamental in our industry. And I love that. It makes me very proud to be part of this organization, Coldwell Banker and Realogy at large, and even allowing me to continue doing these events because I think they're wonderful. So
Yeah,
let me switch.
Ryan, I was just going to
Go
say too,
on.
Ryan
Go.
Goldman, our CEO, did that right when he had an event for
Yeah.
the fully open to the public.
Yeah.
It's a great example, fully open to the public, answering questions about housing. I mean, that's just it's a different way to behave, but pretty natural to him.
Yeah, and I think
So
it's something all of our affiliates, all of our agents, all of our teams can see going down and learn from and leverage. Right? I've had agents then do events where they've taken, brought leaders on to speak to their client base and the consumers and provide additional insight to them and help, reach out and touch their sphere by inviting them to events or just calling, doing cares calls and giving information out and just staying connected to the community, doing the right thing by the community is such a show of leadership and it manifests in a lot of different ways, right? Your platform doesn't have to be international or national. It can be your office or just your team even. And the affiliate brokerage that says, here's how I'm going to get back to my community. Here's how I'm going to leverage and communicate within my market. That's leading, and people are going to see that, and it's leading in crisis, and it's saying, I'm not going to lay down. I'm going to see what I can do. I'm not going to sit and wait for this to pass, right? And it's I think that's a really important component of all of this is how do you pick yourself up and kind of face the day and face the challenge. So I'm curious, in your personal life or your professional life, what has been maybe beyond this or before this, I should say, because this would be the easy one to say, what else have you learned that you've applied in a leadership capacity, right? From a, resiliency, if we're going to stick to that word as the topic, but what has helped you prepare for this?
Well, I had a great lunch with you one day when I was thinking that I should consider a career change. And it was a big decision. I was working at that time in legal. So I had done sales and marketing positions. I had worked at legal, I've done all different kinds of things. And I had lunch with you when I was considering making a change. And it's not that I didn't love what I was doing. It's not that I didn't love being the ethics and compliance officer of the company. I did love that work and I loved being dedicated to culture. I really loved focusing on how we treat each other and all of that, and making sure people felt comfortable speaking up and doing, making sure we had a great business practice in place. But I could do it. I was like, I had sort of figured out how to do it. And I didn't think that you shouldn't get too comfortable, right? You should be really having some part of your life. You have to be stretching. You always have to be stretching. And I had such a good lunch with you, and we sat outside, and you just said, we've got to like pull this compliance hat off of you, and we've got to get another one on. Like you're totally ready to make a move. You're starting to articulate it, but you need to have more framework to it, and you need to really figure out the things that are like, what is that fire that you're feeling? Like which are the things that are firing you up? So you were super helpful. Again, it takes a little bit of courage or guts to I could have just kept doing that, I think, but taking those little bit of leaps. And so that threw me into a whole new world when I pursued that. And I spoke with others in the company, and our company's awesome with, talent development and opportunity. And it threw me from a world of culture and ethics. So dealing with a lot of people issues, but into actually managing business operations and people in a whole different fashion. So I think having done that so recently, just a year and a half ago, it has me in a mode of learning all the time. I'm like open mind, having to learn all the time anyway, and adjust and being again good at realizing you don't know everything, which I'm pretty comfortable with, but being in that mode of like who around is, being taught by your own organization, being taught by everything you read, so I feel like that helped in that I don't have any stuck patterns of how I do my position. I don't have, so when the pandemic comes and blows up everything, it's not like I'm stuck only thinking of life one way. I'm already, sort of in an open mode. How about you? You've had a lot of career change too.
I have. Something you said has always resonated with me. Take the risk. Say yes to the opportunity. I have never, and I've talked about this before, I've never been overly intentional about my career. I've been overly intentional about being good at whatever I'm doing. And I've always felt a tremendous responsibility when asked to do a role or a job. And without knowing it, was often sort of put at the table before I should have been at the table. I had some great leaders, mentors that stood very much behind me and pushed me forward well before I believe looking back, like, oh my God, phenomenal naivete of youth, right? Like I can't imagine, that I was where I was at some of the times that I was. And I've talked about never working for a woman. I never had a female boss. I've never direct reported up to a woman. And so it's part of where my passion for all of this has been born, right? How do I help more women get comfortable taking that risk, taking that step, just I became a little fearless over my life. I think part of that, and I joke because I moved all the time as a little kid. My parents moved me everywhere all the time, ridiculous amounts. Although I think others had me beat. It felt like I moved more than anyone in the world at the time. And I just got very uncomfortable being uncomfortable and stepping into new situations. And, I think if I look back, it's funny, you and I went out to lunch. Ryan Gorman took me out to coffee. So note to anybody in this org, if you're asked to like go out for a meal or something, be prepared for your life to change. And it was for me, this was starting a new career for me, really, 2.5 years ago. I had been on the franchise side of the business for 20 years. I'd been at one company for 15 or 16 years. And then, 5 years ago came to Realogy. And so a lot of it is, for me, it's being willing to say yes to the opportunity, not being afraid of change. I think change is super scary. But amazing things happen. The sort of that intersection of passion and opportunity and fearlessness. And so, what's the worst that can happen, right? That becomes easier to do the older, maybe maybe not the age older, but the more business maturity you have and time and role or whatever that may be, you develop a little bit of that confidence. But, it's been, I think all of that has helped me. I think I have a different lens when I look at things. I think I have a very pragmatic lens. I think I'm very good at separating. That could be good or bad. I guess it depends on who you're asking. Sometimes the real decisioning, the hard decisioning, right? But I'm always taking the long view. I'm always looking at the responsibility I have to both people and organization, which has served me, I think, well. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's been a ride. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think we have such a similar balance in that way. What is the ultimate goal? How do I help the company get to the ultimate goal? But very people focused in how we get there and like getting the team there. I think we both too don't see a lot of the formality that people assume in organizations. I've never thought like you have to go a certain way or go through a certain number of steps. And I have so many conversations like that with people who think about everything in such this linear fashion of like how they can grow up in their exact organization, as opposed to meet somebody or try a different thing or go in a different direction. And that's such a big part of talent development now, to take on a project or make a sideways move. And I hope more and more people will get comfortable doing that. Because
it's such a great point. It's such a great point. And I think, especially today, the growth that comes from more horizontal and broadening of your horizons than just pure vertical movement is amazing. And, I spent 15 years at one company, but I had like 6 different jobs, so my resume looks, if I took on from operations to relocation to brokerage services to training. And now even within Realogy, and I know that's, most of the audience today, we have that opportunity to make moves all across the board and move from, the brokerage to the franchise to the type. So there's always that opportunity. And even for people in the field, agents looking to develop teams, right? That's a stretch. And that's, how do you want to do that? And how do you take more on? So, leverage the resources around you, reach out to people, call people, ask. I think one of the things, there's a question in here, and I'd love your perspective. What do you think? Why do you think women are less likely to take leaps? And how do we overcome the fear to stretch? Any thoughts on that? I have a few, but I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah, I think that I do think that there's an obligation on us to help pull more and more people along. First of all, because there is some hesitation. Perhaps you made an interesting comment about not having a woman boss. I think most of the people who've pulled me along in my career are men, or been perfectly happy to help, have been men. But I think just being women who have really exciting careers, I think it's a little bit on us to make sure we are helping pull people along. I think the hesitancy is there just because women tend to I don't think there's anything that's perfect by gender, perfect like definitionally by gender by any stretch. But I think women definitely seem, like, let's get it really right. Let's make it really perfect. Let's like really push to make it orderly. And like, is it, really, um, not like having less confidence, but there is something there where, just keep like perfecting that craft perhaps. Instead of like, I've got this, I can go on to the next thing. I can take on the next thing. I see a little bit of that.
Mhm.
And I think, I think sometimes, men have a little more natural something to just kind of like go on to the next thing or take on, or maybe life teaches them to be a little more confident or something. I don't know. It would take like a whole course in gender studies.
Yeah. Yeah. We could. Well, it's interesting because I know there are studies that have been done, and I'm not going to quote them well now. I'll get them wrong. But I know that like leanin.org and I think HBR did a couple on, and there's a lot out there, but on women and their resistance. Like women generally, by and large, wait until they check every box on like a job description before they apply, whereas men
Makes
in the studies, like 40%, they're like, yeah, I got this, I can do this, right? So I don't know if it's a confidence thing, I don't know if it's an upbringing thing. I was definitely brought up by both my mother and father to do whatever you want, you can do it all, don't ever settle, go out and get it, like never be dependent, never, right? And so part of that is innately who I am, how I was raised. But I think, and it's funny because I said this to somebody once and they said, I don't believe you. I was so insecure when I was 21 years old. I was in commercial real estate. I got out of it because I didn't have the confidence in myself to do that. So there is a confidence that comes with time, with being good at something, with studying something. Not all of us are born with that. So I do believe you can develop that. Part of it comes from taking the leap, like taking that first leap and either not failing or failing and getting back up. Because if you never take the chance, you're always going to live in fear that you'd fail, right? And so you fail. Like, so I mean, everyone has it some capacity. So I think, and I don't know, you're right, it's a gender studies issue that could be ad nauseum, right? And I think there are tons of studies out there, but I think part of it is I would say find women who have taken the leap, right? If you're out there going, who has done this, who is, like, find somebody, call me, call somebody, like, how did you do it? Like, have somebody prop you up, like, do the role play together, but get really honest with yourself about why you're afraid to take the leap and why you want to take the leap. That's the other thing. I think sometimes there's this false pressure on women to do more and be more, right? And it's like, well, maybe I'm good, right? Or maybe so I think there's also that, and
Yeah.
understand what goes into it. And that starts dissipating the fear, like smack it, like write it down, address it head on. And that helps, I
Yeah. And it's
think.
like
I don't know.
you're good at, like, everyone's good at something. Sometimes people just haven't
Yeah.
figured out that thing that they love. Like, I love the customer interaction.
Yeah.
I love the feeling of, small business. I love the franchise network. I love that these are people who've, um, put their name and the Coldwell Banker name together to create something, and that they give back to their community and they're completely dedicated to the people around them. I mean, that's innate to how I was raised too, in a town where we were deeply involved with the community and as well. But it's something that I really, really like just picking those parts of things that you really like. I really like to listen to figure out what I need to do. You know, I,
Mhm.
I, I don't think that I struggle to listen. I like to listen and try to understand another person's perspective. Um, and so I know that's part of it. So that's good for service. I mean, that's good for a
Mhm.
role that involves some relationships,
Absolutely.
whether it's agent service or affiliate service. Like, figuring out, you're definitely good at things. Like, everybody is really good at stuff. Sometimes they just don't take time. They're just on some track and haven't figured out what it was. When I was a lawyer, I loved it, but what I loved was the client service. I loved
Mhm.
like solving someone's problem. All the black letter law, whatever, I could learn it. I could take my test. I'm licensed in 3 states, whatever. I can do that stuff. But it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm really excited to write a brief about some like tricky legal issue. No, I loved like getting a problem and solving it for someone and working with that client. Like, I
That's why
figured
we're
that out.
friends, because that doesn't, the brief isn't the part that gets you excited, right? But I think that's so true. Like and you'll get more comfortable taking the leap if it's something you're passionate about, and it's
Yeah.
something, because then you become more comfortable with it, and then you're like, I
Yeah.
got this, and that builds upon and it builds upon. So, a couple more questions came in. One that's, I sort of alluded to a little bit myself yesterday, but it says, we've been asked to take on additional projects while working from home, but the result has been that we have too many spinning plates in the air. By the way, I say that all the time, and my husband laughs. I walk and he's like, are we spinning? Are we spinning? Yeah. And feeling like we can't do it all and coming up short. How do you mentally and emotionally manage and come to terms with this? So phenomenal question, and something I would bet 100% of people at home right now in some way, shape, or form are dealing with. And you and I talked a little bit about that before, but what are your thoughts on that? Maybe it's around prioritization of work, support, where to go and ask, and how are you managing?
I think one thing I realized a little bit last night, and I started talking to a couple of people in my team, one saying, oh my God, I'm so thankful for you. I just want you to know that, like, you're doing an awesome job. And another saying, we really need to start a gratitude program and make sure we are sending something, communicating with people. Now, we've done communicating, obviously, like, it's COVID. Obviously, we're like communicating with people. But I realized yesterday we needed to show gratitude. Like, it has gotten to that point, right? If you're feeling it yourself, I mean, that's the leadership piece. If you're feeling that yourself, so is everyone else. Everyone's feeling overwhelmed, and like, nobody notices what I'm doing. And like, oh my God, I'm not even sure if I'm good at it. That's one thing I try to do. I realize, like, what I'm feeling, probably a lot of people are feeling. So my immediate reaction now is I try to administer that. I try to say, like, okay, that's probably, where a lot of people are at. So I think part of that is solved by, making sure your leadership knows that you need to be acknowledged and thanked. Because I think that feeds it. Like, there is a lot of chaos. And the other thing is, like, hearing that, like, you're not going to get everything done. We have a lot of, ideas going, but as far as the refreshing piece, like, you have to know when you're tapped out. I've realized I'm really better in the morning. It's good if I have a little bit of focus time. I'm using a Microsoft tool that assigns focus time on my calendar. I'm realizing if I can have a little focus time where I don't jump into a day pummeled with problems, I can manage that way. And we're starting our no meeting. We're trying to have no meeting days. Yeah. Those kinds of things. I don't know. Do you think that gets to the question? I think it is such a good question. I think there's a lot of that feeling right now.
There's a ton of that feeling. And, it's interesting. It's not just within our industry, right? It's not just our company. And I think that perspective is helpful. So I'm part of a group that is of senior executives from all other industries. And I've been on a couple of calls through this time on crisis management. And it's amazing to hear across every industry this same feeling, right? This same feeling of, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. I'm working more hours. I'm home. I may have had a pay reduction. All of these things, that doesn't make it easier, right? And it doesn't make that feel okay personally, but it does sometimes help to know that you are not alone, right? And by the way, you're not alone in any level. Like, I told, I 7:30 last night, like, I'm done, I'm out. There are emails I didn't get to. I will get to them today. And, I'm not what I'm encouraging everybody to do is, first of all, if you're a leader of people on the phone, or just a person, right? Reach out and ask somebody how they're doing. Reach out, start the conversation with, how are you? How's your family? Like, how can I help, right? And sometimes as a leader, it's as easy as saying, okay, what are you working on? Don't worry about that. Like, I get that I've told you we need this, and that. Because sometimes, and I know this for a fact, I know I do it. I'll be like, all right, we got to do this, and we got to do this, and we got to do this, and we got to do this. And I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, like, over the next, 30 days, but my team's hearing, oh my God, by Friday, right? And oh, by the way, we close early on Friday. And, so I think as a leader, we sometimes can be more intentional in our communications about our expectations. It's like when I say to my husband, I want the vacation house, he looks at me like I have 4 heads. I'm like, oh no, like, by the time I die, right? Like, I don't need it tomorrow, but because I put it out there, there's this expected reaction all the time. So, and the mental and the emotional, look, everybody goes about it differently. I meditate. I have a phenomenal, the app on my phone, because of course it's on my phone, because I bring my phone next to the bed, and it's also how I wake up with emails. But I go to bed with my insight time or meditation, or I take the walk, or, tap out. I mean, I know some other senior leaders that called in and said last Friday, like, I'm taking 5 hours off. Like, you have to do it. And I know it's so hard when you feel like the world is on your shoulders. Your leader understands, or they should. And if they don't, like, let us know, right? I mean, that's, so one of the two other questions came in, and I know we still got about 15 minutes. So one was, as someone who is driven, passionate, and goal-oriented, how do you recommend I use this time to stay focused and hungry and not get distracted by what's happening around us? Any thoughts?
Well, I think that I was having this thought the other day, like how with unemployment as it is, there's like this whole new pressure where I think people perform at their best when they don't have that kind of distraction. That's like new. I mean, I think people should feel, joyful and like they're doing something they want to do, and that, it's free, like it's freedom. I mean, you could, if you didn't like it, you could leave. Like you should, I think you're going to do your best. There's this sudden weird additional pressure coming on people too. And that might be part of all this. Like people actually worried now. Am I doing a good enough job? And like, oh my God, what happens if something happens to my job? There's like all these new dark pressures coming on people's like state of mind, on how they're performing and how they stay focused on career development, because they're starting to feel more pressed about like just the very thing that they're doing. So I think we need to, realize this is temporary. And, I think it's great to stay focused on goals, not just like for the year, right? We're talking about that at our company, making sure we have goals for the year, and are we generally on track for them? But, giving yourself some forgiveness. We just spent a couple of pure months on an unexpected thing. And then as far as career, also continuing to reach out. So you're in that, and I never feel like people do enough of this. You're in that group of women leaders. I participated in a webinar yesterday with that Fortune Most Powerful Women group that they put on webinars. I mean, it is so important to get other people's perspectives and keep your mind interested in the things that, that you're interested in, and touch base with people outside of our group. I love listening to you, but like, it's just we wouldn't just draw from each other. We draw from huge groups of people across the company and outside. I mean, I think drawing from outside perspectives is so important to get ideas. Like, you don't have to think of everything. So many people have great ideas. Our affiliates have great ideas. Our agents have great ideas. Our entire, brokerage management team. There are so many good ideas. You never have to think like it's you, but go enjoy that creativity and form new relationships. Like, even in this world, you can still do 15-minute coffee, like we can still have our coffee. We have our matching cups. We can still form relationships this way. We did one little thing, to keep people not feeling so much pressure and not just overwhelmed. We've done a couple little play exercises type things where we did like poetry. We wrote haikus as a group, and we did nothing but goof around and learn about poetry for an hour. And it was totally fun. And we left the thing with, little poems that we'd written. I mean, that might sound weird to some people, but it was totally fun. We did trivia. We've done different things. So incorporating a little play and a little outside perspective, I think could cure.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think you have to find the mental breaks. That helps to have fun, right? To still laugh. I mean, I think Tanya took a video of all of us on our leadership call the other day, and we were so giddy. I mean, I was like crying. I don't even think there was anything funny, honestly, but it was just that fun sort of relief of like, somebody made some silly joke and it set us all off, and we're like, oh my God, like, is this really happening? Like, at some point you have to have this like, good God, like, this is really happening, and then I think you do like find other ways to learn. LinkedIn Learning has some great things. Look into some blogs, just keep sharpening your sword on whatever interests you. Don't be overly focused on, I need to lean in on like this topic or real estate or whatever. Like, what's interesting, and how are other companies engaging on this? Or, I think there's always opportunity. I think it's super important, maybe more so now than ever, to take that hour a week or whatever the time is and invest in you. Because as company leaders, I value that. I value tremendously when somebody's investing in themselves, because your perspectives will become more diversified then. And that around the table is amazing. And we want to see that. So I think that's very important. So we're really down to 10 minutes. I hope so. I mean, I said
I,
it, so it must
I
be.
love it. I mean, I think it's true. Like other companies innovating too. We live with people who have companies that are innovating. There's so much
That's
that we can
right.
do. There's so much creativity
It's
flowing
so
right
much, so much. And so just latch onto it and stay engaged that way. So here's an interesting one. So two very interesting ones. As a top female leaders in the industry, do you find you have to defend decisions that are perceived too empathetic or maybe not empathetic enough? And so,
now.
interesting. I
It's a
think there's a
great
big difference. Well, it's a great question. And I always like to hone in a little bit on the difference between empathy and sympathy, because empathy to me is very important. It means that you are taking into consideration the individual's feelings or how it impacts, but you're not allowing that to consume you, and you're not taking that on, right? Like, and I think as women, I I will say that I have probably over time been accused of being a little bit too direct. I know there's people laughing out there somewhere, including Ryan Gorman. That I can be very decisive. I can be and sometimes that can come across maybe more cold. But that's my style. I've decided not to defend myself. I decided long ago. I feel like I was going to just sing a Bette Midler song, but I made that decision very purposely when my daughter was really young and I was traveling. She was 11 months old and I took a job in California. And for the first year, I was commuting every other week to California, and I commuted that way for 4 years. So I was away a lot. I'm making up for it now in spades. But a lot of people judged, and a lot of people had comments, and I decided that I had to own my decision through my lens, through my family's lens, through who I wanted to become. And I think whether it comes down to whether my actions are too empathetic or not empathetic enough, as long as I own the decision and I own the rationale that led to the decision, and I'm not uncomfortable with that I can put my head on the pillow, then I don't really worry about that. And that may sound really cold, and so maybe it needs like 30 more minutes of discussion to really get that across. Somebody will take that the wrong way, but I just mean, if you're going to be a leader, you've got to figure out your style. You've got to figure out how you're going to lead, no matter what you do, no matter how you're going to be transparent as a leader, be authentic, right? And that means not worrying too much about how somebody's going to perceive that decision, but know that you have to live with the decision. You get to blame no one else. So I don't know. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think they're so right. It's not, you definitely go through this process of, at some point you care so much less about what people think of you. So that just like fades away over time. You're not like that focused on like, what's the person thinking of me? You are focused on just what's the right decision to make. And like the other noise quiets down over time in your life or through the experience or whatever it is. And if people can just get to that, like forget all the other noise that might come in their head as they go through life and just focus on like trying to make that right, fair decision. Yeah, it does clear everything up. In personal life, it's interesting. You make a lot of, those are big decisions you made as a mom. And I think it's always good to just like have a variety of voices. Like you should have, a mix of opinions, but it's like when you're a mom who's working, it's good to have some friends who are working too, so they can understand your struggles. It's really good to have perspective of moms who are home, so you can like see all that value and
Yep.
you're getting sort of the best of everything. I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things of being a working mom. I think in many ways, the moms I'm friends with who are working on their families and their homes primarily are like more supportive of me in some ways than the rest of us who are just like, I mean, they're really wonderful, supportive and interested. It's there's like such a great, I do think women, there's a really good support available, among friendships. And that's like something that's really important to take time for.
Very important. And to find the friends that are going to be supportive, whether they're working or not, and to continue as a working mom to be supportive of non-working moms or friends that don't have children or friends that are taking care of elderly parents, some of us that are doing both, we got it on all ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever that may be. I think it's very important. And that's where that compassion comes in. And even, there's a question on here about mentors. Have you had a mentor? Can you speak to the essential attributes of a good mentor? I've never personally had a formal mentor. I've had a lot of informal mentors, and I don't even know that I realized they were them until I looked back later. But it's interesting being home now. I'm getting a little bit of an experience. I looked at my girlfriend the other day and I said, we were 6 feet apart, don't worry. But I said, oh my God, people live like this? Like people are home every day for dinner, so, and she works and she's full time, but she never gets on a plane. Right. And so even that difference in our complexity in our lives has been super interesting and a time to learn. And I think we'll take a lot of this forward as leaders, right? This will change how we lead, how you lead, right? I mean, there's got to be something you're taking away from this that'll inform your leadership style going forward.
Yeah, and I think think about the people who are home also with young children, like teaching. Like that's probably back to the beginning. That's like the ultimate resiliency, right? You're like teaching school and working. I mean,
I'm learning about parallelograms. I don't, I forgot about that.
There's so much new flexibility we all need in our learning, through this experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a question on here about telling us more about the Microsoft tool that assigns time on your calendar. I think that's Insights. Is that the Microsoft Insights?
It is Insights. It's that thing that tells you spent like 24 hours of the last 24 hours in your computer, but then it also makes recommendations about how to live your life better. And it said, would you like me, the computer, to try to block time? And it did. It's Insights.
I should do that. I get the thing and I delete it because I get depressed by seeing that I've like not taken a day without. But anyway, so listen, we are up. What?
I said it's artificial intelligence. You have to let it work.
Artificial intelligence. I do have to let it work. Okay, that's right. That's what we're supposed to lean into that. So I want to thank you so much, Liz. This was awesome. I really hope it was valuable to the folks out there. I know there were one or two questions we didn't get to, some interesting ones about being a woman in the real estate space and taking leadership roles. So I don't know if we know where they came from or not, but we'll be happy to maybe even answer some of them on the next call, which will be on Wednesday, June 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern, where we are going to be bringing you special guest, Sally Roberts. So Sally is a leader in the female wrestling world. She was a national champion. She competed on the Olympic level. She failed to make the Olympic team. She then joined the military. She served in the Middle East in special ops. And when she returned home, she started a national organization focused on empowering women, female empowerment, and it's called Wrestle Like a Girl. And her story is amazing. Her focus on overcoming obstacles and empowering women from a young age and beyond is something sure not to be missed. So again, a huge thank you to Liz. I think they bounced her off the screen already, but Liz, it was amazing having you on. You're an inspiration to me and to so many. And I think, there you are. And I thank everybody for taking a little time out of your day to hopefully get some good conversation, some dialogue, maybe some good takeaways, and take another hour or two for yourself this weekend, please, this week. And have a wonderful holiday. Thank you, Liz.